Welcome to show 69. And we have traveled south today. Not quite on a vacation to Florida, but nonetheless, it'll be a fun time for an hour because we have with us Charles Dzuiban from the University of Central Florida and Patsy Moskal, who are in charge of the Wright Center, Research and Teaching Effectiveness, for decades, where they've been exploring what it means to be a teacher online, a learner, or blended learning. And they've been adapting new technologies ever since. They've got a long history of research, teaching, service related to online and distance learning and adaptive learning and learning analytics. But more than that, they've got all sorts of books you might want to buy on blended learning research because they're researchers in the field as well. So I think we'll start with Chuck and Patsy talking about the Wright Center and why people took buses to visit when conferences were held in Orlando back in the early 2000s and late 1990s. Why did people come by the busloads to see what you were doing over at UCF Research and Teaching Effectiveness? Patsy, you want to jump in first?
Oh my goodness, Kurt. I think there might have been a little bit of an exaggeration there with busloads of people, but we do have a lot of visitors that come to UCF. And I think one of the reasons is that, we have some longevity. UCF's been doing online and blended learning since, actually online since 1996, blended since 1997. And we were just fortunate at that time that our administration, one had we had the funds to do it right, and they saw the need and the value of having not just the faculty development support, but also the evaluation support. So that's really how we started. And we didn't start as Wright. We started as the what were we, Chuck? The distributed learning impact evaluation. I'm not sure who came up with the distributed part, that term. We've kind of evolved through the years. And we were just, we were asked to evaluate the effectiveness of this new thing called online learning that we started, the university started getting involved with. And over the years, it evolved into a formal research initiative for teaching effectiveness, where we're still monitoring online, blended, as you said, all things technology enhanced education, and also try to help support faculty who want to do research on the use of innovative technologies in their classrooms.
There's two things I want to add to that, and that UCF was the first institution or one of the first that designated their classes as blended or fully online or face-to-face. They actually had a blended designation early on, because you have a chapter in my handbook of blended that talks about that.
We do.
And you wouldn't exist to the degree that you are the largest university in Florida now without blended learning. So Chuck, you want to jump in and describe why blended learning has elevated the status of UCF and fully online as well, and about what your involvement in this training initiative called Wright.
Indeed. I'm terrified here, Kurt, because we've got an hour to talk about all of this. And before I do this, I'd like to say that thank you for inviting us to your class. Patsy and I had a spectacular time with your students, and we really enjoyed being with them. We don't get to interact with students very often, and they were delightful, they were challenging, and they followed up with us long after the class, and we really had a wonderful time with your group of people. That was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And still, one responded to you last week. You're helping her with her dissertation, so thank you back for helping her out.
Indeed, it's like any presentation. The good stuff happens after. Whoever plans anything, this is always a question. You originally said the first question you were going to ask us is, what were your dreams? I don't know. I guess it was, what were your nightmares? It was a long story, but how blended learning evolved at UCF was purely by accident, because we were totally involved in online learning. And when Patsy and I began looking at the demographics, we found that a large proportion of our students were taking online classes from the campus, from the library, from tech centers, from other places. And suddenly we said, wait a minute, look, if they're doing this on campus, is there some way we can take the affordances of face-to-face and the affordance of online learning and put them together into this? At the time, we called it mixed mode. And we stuck with mixed mode for a very long time until Frank Midas at Sloan began funding blended learning. And then we changed the name to follow the money to do this and this. And then it evolved. And it didn't happen rapidly. It was a very evolutionary kind of process, much of what we'll talk about today is a complex system. And in that, there is emergence. There is always, it is more than the sum of the parts. Emergence is very important to us in a complex system. It's diverse, it's adaptive, it's interconnected, it's interactive, and again, it's adaptive. So, emergence always happens from the bottom up. And that's the way it happened at UCF. Emergence is, geese don't have a meeting and say, let's fly in a V. It just happens. Fish don't have a meeting and say, let's swim in school. It just happened. And that's the way it happened. Blended learning evolved on its own initiative at UCF. And the other thing is, we began showing people data, all kinds of data in terms of outcome, in terms of demographics, in terms of student preferences, in terms of student reactions. And people began to say, oh, this is very informative, and they said, we'd like you to continue doing this. And we did it with a caveat that will bring you all the news, not just the good news, and this then has stood us in very good stead. We've been able to do that and that is in a sense how this research initiative became an integral part of our culture, and Patsy does Legion work helping faculty do scholarship of teaching and learning within the disciplines.
But you also had support from administrators who are looking at the cost benefit analyses and figuring out what the cost of building new buildings would be and so forth. Joel was very much, right there with you, in fact, and so were others. But I also remember a story you telling about the fact that you'd help faculty A to Z. If you'd help them go to the conference and present their papers with them.
Oh yeah.
So talk before we go to Chris's question. Talk a bit about the support that's provided for faculty at UCF to adapt fully online and blended.
Pat, you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, Chuck is right. I think the focus on quality and making sure that the research and the information, or the research that we do is turned into information for those administrators is really critical. But what we found early on is Chuck and I would do presentations about comparing, of course, everything is online compared to the gold standard, what people considered the gold standard, face-to-face, right? We would do these presentations and the faculty would sit there and think, well, that's great for the administrators, but that's not helping me with my individual teaching. And so we saw that as an opportunity and trying to help them really break down any barriers to them doing research on their teaching in their classroom. So what we do is we make a pitch to faculty at our faculty development training. We tell them we will work with you. If you have an idea or you're redesigning your class, we want to help you with the research design. If you need surveys, if you need data, we'll talk to you about the possibilities of what you can capture in terms of either SIS data, learning analytics data. We'll help you beg, borrow, steal, learn from others. We have great graduate students in our office and they're experts at looking at the literature. So we'll go back and find, who's an expert in this and what have they done, what have they found, and use that to inform their research. And then we will help them, craft any kind of survey or figure out how to get the data, work with other units on campus, our institutional research office. And we actually will help them analyze the data and provide it to them in presentation, publication, quality format. So we give them pretty charts and graphs or pretty tables. It's their intellectual property. It's free of charge. And really the whole goal is to seed individual research on, instructional technologies throughout the university.
It must be
And-
pretty
and,
satisfying to had such an impact on your university, to see it grow. And the big part of the growth is because of your center, you know. Just
Well, yeah, well, yes and no. Look at the demographics of where we are. Now, we'd like to think that, because of Wright, the university grew. But one of the things that we do with faculty is we help them think through the research process in terms of, invariably, faculty come to us wanting to do a dissertation all over again. They want to do this huge, huge project. And we say, whoa, cowboy, let's slow it down a little bit and go very, very carefully in terms of doing this. So we can take them through the entire process. And it's very instructive. But even more than that, it's more than individual faculty. After a while, what we're able to do is build cohorts of faculty within departments who are then collaboratively doing research within rhetoric, within chemistry, within physics, that is interacting with each other in this kind of liquid network, which again is an emergent phenomenon that happens within departments. And that's something we didn't anticipate, but that clearly happens. And they're publishing all over the place.
Chris has to jump in here, and Young's after him. So Chris?
So I want to thank you for your research, because it's been very important for the field as well as for UCF. And if you take research on blended learning as a case study of, research's impact on the field, there's two puzzles that I think make it a very interesting case study. The first puzzle is methodological. So people from time immemorial have done comparisons of distance to face, correspondence courses, radio courses, television courses, online courses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they kept coming back with no significant differences. There was even a gigantic website. I don't know if you remember that. Where compiled.
Bill Russell. I remember Russell's website.
That an unbelievable website. And I would talk to students who say, well, I want to study this. And I would say, if you do what you're proposing, you'll get yet another no significant differences finding. So why were people attracted to this like flies to fly paper? Well, it seemed obvious, right, that there would be significant differences, and there were, but the methodology was wrong. See, if some students do better and other students do worse in each medium, but all that you measure is the average, you're missing the significant difference, which is what works when for whom. And it's been so hard to get the field to that point. So that's a puzzle for me. Why do people keep reverting to this one size fits all averaging when it seems quite obvious at this point that some people do better with one and some people do the other better with the other? And that's why blended is better than either one in isolation, because it's both and.
Oh, Dee Dee, I really like you. I don't even know you, and I like you. Let me start by quoting one of my mentors, Bill Walster, at the University of Wisconsin, who said, 98% of what we do should be published in the Journal of Type 1 Errors. Yeah. And here we go. We do modeling here. And invariably, the mode of a course predicts nothing. Nothing. It is the worst predictor ever. I'm sure you saw in Nature, the 800 scientists who signed on to the article and said, significance testing has to go. I'm sure you saw that,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go, but you have to think about, don't do this mindless comparison. Now, blended learning. Blended learning is a boundary object. Susan Lee Starr talked about boundary objects, wonderful stuff. An example of a boundary object is something like critical thinking. If I go to this campus, if I go to the faculty center and say, who's in favor of critical thinking? Everybody's in favor of critical thinking. Everybody wants it. Okay. Now we get together and talk about what is critical thinking? And there is a dogfight. Nobody agrees on what critical thinking is. Example of a boundary object. But if I go to physics, I go to rhetoric, I go to optics, I go to math, they know. They absolutely know within the discipline what critical thinking is, which means a boundary object is strong enough to hold together a community of practice, but it's very weak. And that's exactly what blended learning is. It's a boundary object. And I am driven crazy by people who do meta-analysis of online, face-to-face, and blended learning and come to some conclusion when blended learning is never treatment, never will be. So we're on the same thing, because exactly what you said is this monumental interaction of blended learning and characteristics of people. Thank you for that comment.
Sure. Well, but it's an interesting puzzle because even, the Harvard methodologists still fall into the same trap over and over and over. Then there's the second puzzle, which I think is actually the cause of the first puzzle, and that is the worship of face-to-face. The concept that some students learn better remotely than they do face-to-face is heresy. I mean, it's not just that people disagree with it. They think that you're crazy to even say it. And I say to them, do you hang up on grandma when she tries to FaceTime because the stupid old lady moved away and now the kids are bereft of any valuable contact because, God, remote sucks, right?
Well,
they won't generalize from the personal to the professional.
Here's what we do with our faculty and our faculty training. We say, there are no more face-to-face courses left. There are no face-to-face courses ever at UCF. And then I get all of this pushback, and I get the pushback about, the gold standard. The only way you can teach is face-to-face. So then what I do, Chris, is I say this. You remember the days when we lectured? They went, we lectured, they went, they came back and we lectured. And then they got really annoying because they wanted to tweet us, they wanted to email us, and they wanted constant access to us. And if you really believe that the walls of that room contain the thing you call a class, you're sorely misconstruing the situation. Because now, not only are they talking to you on a regular basis, they're talking to each other about you, okay? And they're talking to each other more about you. And then they're talking to the world about you. And if you don't believe me, go on YouTube and look for drunk professor, look for stoned professor, look for terrible professor, and you will find videos of all of those. There are no more
my professor, right? Huh? Rate my professor.
Rate my professors. I mean, I love, my favorite comment on Rate My Professors is, this guy is so boring, my pillow needs a pillow. That is a marvelous comment. I mean, that is wonderful. And we have a little blog that we keep where all of our faculty save the one thing that a student said about you that has stayed with you your entire teaching career. And I'll share with mine. A student wrote about me, Chuck Dzuiban is a very smart man. He may be even as smart as he thinks he is. See, but the whole notion of that somehow the only mode of learning is going to be face-to-face is gone at UCF. Nobody believes that anymore.
Young, over to you.
Well, I could be.
I was interested in that conversation because about 15 years ago, I took on the no significant study idea, but took a different direction. I was thinking about the within variation is bigger than the between variation. So this was, so the article was published in Teachers College Record. So if you look at this whole thing, you got plenty of bad teachers, plenty of good teachers doing face-to-face, and plenty of bad and plenty of good ones on distance. If you compare them, it doesn't make sense. But what if we did say, okay, what if we did analysis of the studies themselves within to say, how are online better, this way or the other way. So that was the study I led with that. But the real question actually I come to is that another thing actually I was trying to endorse you, Chuck, is that is the idea of meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is really sometimes horrible in education, because you're basically averaging two studies in which one, someone joked about it, one is in the oven of 300 degrees, another one, maybe another in the refrigerator 300 degrees, you average out to 0. So it doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's another story, okay? Just feel pretty good. My question for you and Patsy actually has to do with K-12. Because as Chris was saying, as you were saying, face-to-face or in-person learning has become the norm. Even with COVID-19, people are still think, oh God, online learning, blended learning did not give my kids much. Although you read reports to say, oh, why do these kids do better in online learning? So I want to really ask you, given all your great experiences, what advice would you give K-12 school leaders and teachers to design a better hybrid or blended learning environments? Some practical advice you might give them. This is beyond UCF, but really K-12 school leaders and teachers.
Well, that's quite a question.
Hey, don't comment on my question. No comment.
Yeah, right. Hey, Wong, your people give speeches disguised as questions.
Well,
Let me go back to you.
That's what we do. I forgot to tell you. That's what we do.
Yeah, I know.
And you still accepted to come in here,
So let me go back.
I have one comment. Yeah, I just want to say one thing that we're really careful about. I think a lot of folks post-COVID are going to end up looking at what's happened the last year and try to say online learning or blended learning doesn't work. And what happened last year was not what we all who have been in this space know as quality online learning. You can't compare the remote instruction, the rapid remote instruction. And I think our friends in K-12 had it far worse than we did, because many of us have the support structures already in place to be able to support, the learners and the faculty who went remote. I mean, even with our sophistication, we realized quickly how many students had been using the labs on campus and didn't have the technology to be able to access their courses. I think that's going to be something moving forward that's really going to be a challenge. But I think K-12, having the faculty development and the training to really look at one of the pieces, and I think the question that Chris asked is related. We have always focused on, from a teaching perspective, let your learning objectives determine what technology you want to use. What is the best technology to help you meet your learning objectives? Don't start with the technology and then try to make it fit your class. And I think that goes back to what Chris said, what works for what learner depends on your learner, right? So it depends on what your learners, skills are, what their weaknesses are, what they have access to. All those things actually impact it. Chuck, are you ready? I stalled for you a little bit. Are you ready?
Well, this is all interesting. The bigger picture is, if you want K-12 to work, you're going to have to start funding it. You're going to have to start paying teachers, and you're going to start that. At least our state is going to have to understand, that this is important work, and that these young people are the hope of the country, and we're just not funding it well enough for them to do the kinds of things. But I'm going back to your between variants kind of thing. Is the world is moving on. The world is moving on. We are basically done with sampling, estimation, and hypothesis testing. We have long since moved on to big data, modeling, and machine learning. The idea of sort of groveling around in hypothesis testing still is no longer relevant to the kinds of things that we can do. I mean, when we have the kinds of data that we have available to us, we don't have to worry about estimation as much as we did, and we can tolerate much more. So we've got to think about this, I hate to use cliches, but paradigm shift. We've got to get away from thinking like that. The trouble is we're old. Well, I'm old. And I've been taught that way. And it's difficult for me to move away from that. But that's what's coming. That is what's coming down the way. And you know, I wish we could move faster, because no longer can you abdicate the decision-making responsibility to whether it's significant or not. You can't do that anymore. You have to take responsibility for your decisions. And that's the new world. You know, that is the new analysis world. There is no question in my mind. Was that a speech disguised as an answer?
No, I was actually more looking for a different answer. I was looking for you to give suggestion to K-12 schools, you know, about what can they do to create a better blended learning for their students when COVID gets under control or whatever happens, so they don't teach online learning.
Okay. I can make attempts at that, because I go back to Chris Didi's point in interaction. People, you know, faculty will ask us here, will I be any good online? And my answer is, I don't know. Do you suck face to face? Then you'll suck online. I mean, you know, that's the nature of the game in terms of teachers are better or worse, more adapted to modes than not. And one of the things that Patsy neglected to mention, our faculty don't have to worry about technology. They worry about pedagogy. They worry about what they want to accomplish in the class, and we handle all the technology. You never have to press a button. You know, all you need to worry about is how to teach and how to teach well and what worked and what didn't. We'll fix everything else for you. What we have to do is we have to do that for public school teachers. We have to then let them worry about teaching their kids, which are much more diverse than ours. You know, you know, we're not as homogeneous as Harvard, but we're somewhat homogeneous. So I don't know, maybe you're diverse, Grad. But what we have to do is we have to support the teachers and let them do their job. You know, that's what we have to do. And that's not an easy fix. It's not simple, but it will be a combination of technology and what they do so well in the classroom. That's a good problem.
I do think one thing, you know, and I think I'm not necessarily pro or con Zoom instruction, but I think that, you know, the last year has helped folks realize how open we are to the rest of the world. So K-12, those who haven't had experience, there's so many resources available online that are now available that they could use and connect with others, you know, others in the field that they'd be able to learn from and bring into their classroom when they might not have access to otherwise. I do think, though, Chuck is exactly right in terms of, you know, one of the things we found is you have to have the support for that, and the training and the really, you know, faculty development to be able to help faculty overcome the obstacles of learning how to use the system. So typically what happens with any of our, like with our adaptive learning, for instance, with any of our technologies, you know, you have the people who are the super test folks who love to get into the brand new stuff and are like Kurt and Chuck, who work, you know, 80-hour weeks because they just love it and they're running with it. Those folks get out and really push the envelope. And I think that helps others learn as well. So, you know, get your superstars out in front.
Well, it's really interesting because we just had a development thing on Friday, and one of the people from the Seminole County School District gave a scenario of what they had to deal in order to deal with COVID in a public school system. We thought we had it hard. They had an absolute train wreck. The things that they had to deal with were way beyond anything we had to deal with at the university. Programs wouldn't talk to each other, you know, 6 grade books, teachers having to do face-to-face and online, you know, parents. I mean, they had more to deal with COVID than we could imagine, what school districts, and the fact that they were able to operate I give them more credit than you can believe. That was amazing, wasn't it, Patsy?
Yeah, and I mean, honest, that's one of our, I would say, more affluent school districts in
Right.
Central Florida. So it was pretty interesting to hear
Mhm.
that conversation, definitely.
Right.
Before we go to Chris's comment, I just want to give a shout out to Karen Swan, who's watching on the YouTube channel and in charge of the SIG
Karen!
for AERA. So great to have Karen Swan with us from the University of Illinois Springfield, and Patrick Dixon's with us, as well as John Heffernan from Ireland. So
Okay.
so thanks for all of you. And send us some questions. Put some questions to ask these.
Well,
great
as long as
people.
Karen, you're on the line. You know, we're doing our new book on analytics. We're gonna hunt you down.
And they will get you, Karen.
We're gonna get you, Karen.
Chris.
So another thing that UCF has been famous for, and that I think contributes to the success, is the emphasis on simulations. It's been a real leader in simulation-based learning across a variety of fields. And, you know, I've been a champion of simulations and have worked with those for a long time because it's active learning. Its relevance to the real world is clear. It's easier to do transfer than with abstractions. And I just wonder to what extent you see the faculty at UCF recognizing that they have this wonderful culture and infrastructure and weaving those into teaching.
Chris, can you see out my window? Behind me in my window is our International Simulation Center. And the fact of the matter is, because we are so heavily involved in simulation, that it has become an integral part of many of our colleges and universities. Nursing, medicine, physics, chemistry, our optics lab, in terms of doing this, because we are so heavily invested. You know, our research park is bigger than we are. And it has become an integral part of, yes. And basically, we have many of our faculty who believe in using agent-based models, i.e. simulation, to solve problems that you can't do with equations, that you can't do with math. And so, yes, it's become a really important part. And, you know, you've mentioned Teach Live. Have you ever done Teach Live?
I've done immersion.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I've done Teach Live, and, you know, with it there, you are in it. You are simulating a classroom, and you are sweating just like you're teaching with kids again. And it is a wonderful experience. There is no way you can get that experience from a book. There's no way you can talk about that experience. You have to live that experience. And once you have, you move to another direction. You really do. Yeah. And I think it's fortuitous because it's there, but it's an integral part of our culture, Chris. It really is. We're halfway there, Kurt. We haven't talked about adaptive learning. We haven't talked about a lot of things.
Well, maybe we should address one or two of these audience questions.
By the way, you said your time was Jerry Garcia. You know, I have been accused many times of looking like Jerry Garcia, and you're not too far off either, my friend.
But you can play the guitar, unlike
yes,
me.
I can.
So, you know, we're gonna have to bring you in for a show just of music playing. Of all our guests who are musicians, that would be a really great show. We have three questions here, three comments, and you can pick whichever one you want. Robert Nelson, how can teacher development be supported at scale? Ooh. Karen just made a comment about with big data, though, the important issue is how to split your data. And Patrick, online environments could enable students to finish algebra in less time and move on, but schools and university courses hold them constant and test, you know, at prescribed times and so forth. You know, so you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take Patrick's because that actually dovetails right into our adaptive learning. You are exactly right with that. So at UCF, our major platform for adaptive learning is Realize It. And we started back in 2014 and had a pilot. And our faculty, of course, wanted to be in control of their content. So they chose Realize It, which is a content agnostic platform. That's great because you are in complete control of creating the content and assessments. The downside is you are in complete control of creating the content and assessments. So it's AKA a lot of work to do this, right? So one of our superstar math, actually, she teaches college algebra online. So she was a web veteran, had been teaching online college algebra for years, and is one of those folks, Chris, you would have loved it because she has stories. She will not teach, she teaches it online because she recognizes that there are many of her students who could not take this class in a face-to-face setting. So the demographics of her students are such that many aren't even close enough to campus, or they have other life events going on. So she's a convert. She's been teaching it for years in a very rigorous manner, I might say. That's always a concern as well. But she jumped on the opportunity to use adaptive learning and created a course and realized it. And in doing so, she also, as she got her algebra course up, she came up with the notion that, we have some students who are having difficulty. They get put into the intermediate algebra, which isn't for credit, but is something that they're forced to take as a function of their math placement test before they get into college algebra. Her notion was, if we can get them using adaptive learning through that more quickly, then they don't have the stumbling block of those folks who might not get access to a STEM field because taking another math course in the already elongated sequence will just add more time, more money, and so forth. So what she did was she compressed the time, and this did take, going back to Patrick's comment, it took an act of God, working with the registrar and all the forces that be, because we have ourselves siloed into very distinct semesters, and all of our systems are set up to deal with everything from financial aid to final exams to, grade has to be due in at a certain time and all those kind of things. So she was able to use it so that students who went fast enough through the intermediate, if you started and you were able to quickly complete the intermediate algebra, you could dovetail right into college algebra and essentially finish both courses in one semester. So effectively, it cut the time for those students and gave them a better opportunity. Now that is, that's something that our math department has done. But as I said, I totally agree with Patrick. We have the ability now to be able to eliminate those barriers. But, I think that goes back to what Chuck said. Those systems are old, and it's like moving a mountain to try to push that out and change it. But that's actually one big perk that adaptive learning would give you if you design it well.
We should stay on this theme of adaptive learning. If you've read the blog post for this week, you'll notice that we mentioned the article, Adaptive Learning in Psychology, Wayfinding in the Digital Age, which won an award. Chuck or Patsy, you want to explain what that article, the research you did there, and why did it win an award, and what other research are you now considering doing in the adaptive learning space?
Well, it won the award because it was the only paper submitted.
Send me that category next time.
Yeah, right. Well,
a very small award.
I've seen that showcase of all the books on the aisles. You got to navigate the hallways to get into your office and all the awards.
Well, look, Kurt, when you wrote the thing, you talked about John Carroll's article, a model of school learning. They basically built a small E = MC² equation that said, if learning time is held constant, learning outcome is going to be the variable. If learning outcome is the constant, learning time is going to be the variable. And he put that little equation in that paper. And by the way, I always liked John Carroll because Chet Harris at Wisconsin, who trained me, said, you ought to look at this Johnny Carroll at Harvard. He's a really smart guy. But the notion is, when he put that equation together, in the numerator of that equation, basically time allowed, he put opportunity, perspective, and aptitude. The bottom, he he never built out. And Barbara Adam, in her wonderful work on timescale, really did build out the bottom of his equation when she talked about time in terms of time frame, timing, tempo. Those kinds of things are very important in this whole sort of thing. So where we're going with this is what Patsy came to, is the notion of that we're very diverse and students struggle with a lot of our courses. And what we're trying to cope with is how to help these students struggle. Because if you get behind, you get further behind, and then you are lost. We can't do that. So what we're doing is looking at this from the idea is how can we build an understructure under these students to let them succeed? And Patsy just showed you one way. They can start with intermediate algebra in an adaptive course, finish and move right on to college algebra and complete on time. That's the kind of thing that we wanted to do. What we learned, however, is another emergent thing. Again, we're back to emergence, okay? Is from nowhere, from the bottom up, we began to relate to our adaptive learning platform, Realize It, which is our provider. And they have Colm Holland, who is a brilliant data scientist, brilliant. And Connie Johnson, who's the provost at the Colorado Technical University, and Patsy and I sort of got together and emerged into this research partnership that is lovely because we can all and do things that each other cannot and will not. So we support each other. We are, in a way, this emerged research kind of thing. So what we've been able to do then is move on to this. And what we learned very rapidly is that Realize It provides real-time data immediately on any number of variables on how a student is doing in course. Real time, available to the instructor at all times. So suddenly we realized, whoa, I can tell very quickly if a student is going to be in trouble. And that's what the psychology paper was. We demonstrated that we could, within the first week, predict those students who would have difficulty in the course and remediate them we can't use the word remediate, my bad. We don't remediate at UCF, but we could help them understand and gird themselves in a course because we could do it very rapidly. And we were very excited about that. And then we moved on to, analytics and adaptive learning. And we think there's a real relationship between those two constructs. And I can explain what we're doing there. We're down to 15 minutes.
Yeah, so
I'm terrified.
I should point out that in the blog post, Patsy did a really great job of updating it. There's plenty of resources there, and most of them have a link to the actual article. So if you go back to the blog, if you read the first blog post, go back to the revised one. There's about 20 to 30 articles that from Patsy's and Chuck's research over the last decade, right, Patsy?
Yeah, it might be a little too much, yeah, but Chuck is right. I mean, I think adaptive learning, and now, we're in learning analytics, we can actually gather data and metrics in real time or close to real time that show us not just the student performance, but also their engagement with the content. So how do they behave? What do they do? And try to get more, better models and actually focus on what Chris mentioned at the top of the hour in terms of what works well for what students. I think that's really the goal. And as Chuck said, the bottom line is trying to help all of our students succeed.
Well, it's very interesting because it was Jeff Cassisi in psychology who did the paper, and he worked and he was very interested in realizing and working with it. And he finally let the course be completely adaptive. And you know how hard that is for faculty to let an adaptive course be adaptive? They put in stops, they put in all kinds of things. It's not easy. Back to Don's point, I mean, you can't change that easy. And when he turned it adaptive, they did it exactly like they did a semester. They did it unit by unit by unit and worked their way through the semester. I mean, he had literally to do that. And then we moved on to the analytics part of it. And quickly, we always want to do analytics. I mean, analytics is everywhere. Everyone wants to do analytics. So what you do usually with analytics is you have two data sets that duke it out. Okay, you have the student information system that is produced by the university, and you have what goes on in a course, and we can do it within Realize. You let them fight it out. And what wins? That's the question. Panel, what wins? Here's the answer, panel. Grade point average always wins. Historical performance is the best predictor of how someone will do the course, but you can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it. So what we're able to do within an adaptive learning platform is take surrogates and say, what is really correlated with this? And within Realize It, we found two variables. How well do they, and often do they review the material in an algebra course? And do they use their time well and properly? Both of those variables are teachable. So that's the article about time. So we could take students who have a 74% chance of failing college algebra. They're done before they start. Teach them how to review, teach them proper use of time, and give them a better than even chance of passing college algebra. And we'll take it, because you can never really predict one-on-one who's going to succeed. You can just remove obstacles and increase the odds of success. And by the way, Karen is absolutely right. You can really get stuck in a quagmire in big data.
That reminds me of the study skills course out at UT Austin that Pat Alexander created to get kids to review and allocate their time better and other things. And lo and behold, they became better students. So I want to get you to talk about your new book, because I've got the two previous ones. And you know, I did a blended book myself with Charles Graham, an alum of our program, and you twisted his arm and got him to work on these books with you. So he no longer works with me because he's working with you guys. So you've got a book, Blended Learning Research Perspectives, Volume 2. You've got a book, Conducting Research in Online and Blended Learning Environments, New Pedagogical Frontiers. What's the title of Blended 1 and Blended 3? And what's Blended 3 going to be about?
Well, the reason we got Charles is because your books are so damn big. We told him, Charles, we're going to do a small book. It'd be real easy. You don't have to work with Bonk anymore, you know. And he came right over. He came right over, you know. Now, you're not going to do 11.
I was working them hard on the weekends, yeah.
Yeah, right. The whole series started with Sloan C. We were in Chicago talking about this thing called blended learning. Frank Maidas didn't want it. He didn't do it. He finally allowed for us to have a seminar. Tony Picciano and I were in a no-purpose meeting about research and blended learning. And finally, Tony said to me, the hell with this. This isn't working. Let's do a book, Chuck. So we did a book, you know, and it's called Blended Learning Research Perspectives. And then it was successful. So we did a second one called Blended Learning Research Perspectives 2, which was successful, which is basically unheard of. Rutledge came back and asked us to do the third version. No one ever asked us. You always make a pitch to do your book. Chris Dede is famous. You know, they ask him to do a book. But that's the way it did. And what we did is we just found the best people we could from all over the world to be talking about their research. And we really believe the third volume is the best ever, don't we, Patsy? We have lots of people,
yeah.
And we have lots of people from industry now in this book using it. We have someone in petroleum geoservices who's using blended and adaptive learning on aboard ships that are looking for resources in the ocean. Just amazing.
Before I go to Tangelo Park, Patsy, you want to talk about these books and what can people gather from them and get from them, and what was the purpose behind them?
Well, I think the purpose is really kind of what we've been talking about all along. You know, how can we get experts in the field together who've done research in their own areas, whether it's K-12 or international perspectives or healthcare, you know, teaching in the health and health sciences. And so that's really the focus. In blended learning, as Chuck said, you know, I think it's so varied. The definition, I mean, I think that's true of any kind of, when we talk face-to-face, how many varieties of face-to-face learning are there? It's the same as blended. We all kind of have a slightly different definition. And so we really wanted to focus on the research, but try to get some experts in the field, and that's what we've done with all the books, is really rely on other people who are out there in the trenches, and also doing research.
But you know, I just love, I mean, the extremes of those dialogue. I love the Oliver and Trigwell piece, you know, can blended learning be saved, you know, and then the Rona Sharp piece saying that the strength of blended learning is that it's so ill-defined that it gives people the latitude to do whatever they want. So back to Chris Dede, I mean, what the hell, when you do this thing, you just get the average, you know, you just get the average of everything.
I really like the people you got in the book. Rona's an old friend of mine in Oxford. She's just this delightful research. You've gathered all these people together. Have you ever had a conference symposia where you brought some of these people to an event to talk about what, you know, each of their different perspectives on it?
I think the best we've done is try to get some panels together. You know, if we can all get together at conferences, we try to do that, you know, capture a few of the folks and put them on panels, or have them on events like this, for instance, you know, where we can talk about, it's always also, you know, it's challenging depending on the size, because you don't want I mean, people are doing such good work, you don't want them to spend like 10 minutes on something that they need an hour to really discuss. But I think that's the best we've done. That would be a great idea, Kurt. You know, we just have to find a funding source to do that, right? So
it'll probably happen. I promised you a bit of time. I said at most a half hour. I figured it'd probably be 10 minutes. We've got about 10 minutes left to talk about Tangelo Park. It's a topic that we should at least address here. So if people watch this recording later, they can come back and write to you, especially since diversity, equity, and inclusion is such an important topic at every university today and in every institution and organization around the world. And you have a rich history of involvement and doing research on it and finding it's a success story. It's in a big way, and it's something that maybe is replicable. So can you describe the Tangelo Park project, and is it replicable? Is it scalable? Is it sustainable? And what have you found?
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that, because as we talk about this has been my concentration for the last 2 decades in terms of doing this. And I am going to put up the picture. This is the picture of Harris Rosen. Harris Rosen is the face of new philanthropy. Harris Rosen is the way we have to go if we are going to change the direction we're going in the country. What is the problem we're trying to solve? You know, oftentimes what we do is we come up with solutions looking for a problem. Let me give you an idea of what I think the problem is. If you live in the lowest economic quartile in this country, in the United States of America, the probability of your getting a college degree is 11%. The odds against you are 9 to 1. It has nothing to do with anything but your economic status. Okay, that is totally unacceptable in this country, and it has not changed. Access has improved, success has not improved markedly in this country for our underserved communities. The current accumulated college debt in the United States is $1.7 trillion. It's unforgivable. If that were a GDP, it would be the 11th largest economy in the world. You know, we are crippling. And guess who is penalized most by college debt? Guess. And you don't have to guess, you know. So the question is this. Tangelo Park, 5 minutes. 30 years ago, if you were on International Drive in Orlando and you wanted to do a drug buy, you talked to a bellhop who had the look, it would send you to Tangelo Park. You could go into Tangelo Park and drug dealers would come out everywhere. Tangelo Park was a dangerous, dangerous community. Drug dealers, crime. Bob Allen, the principal of Tangelo Park Elementary School, had to police the playground every morning looking for drug paraphernalia, weapons, stolen cars, and would watch drug deals go down outside his window. 30 years ago. Fast forward today, with Harris Rosen's help, Here's what he did for this community. If you live in Tangelo Park, if you have a 2-year-old, we will provide quality education beginning at 2 years of age through 3 through 4, free of charge, beginning preschool. You saw Heckman's work, how critical preschool is to the future of our American students. When they do this, when they go on to kindergarten, they're ready. Can you imagine what it's like not to be ready in kindergarten? It's like the 5 of us going into quantum physics. You know, good luck. We will support you all the way through elementary school. We will see that you succeed. If you are accepted to a state university, a community college, a vocational school in the state of Florida, we will pay room, board, tuition, expenses in perpetuity forever. You will leave college debt free. We will make all the arrangements. We will interact with the university. We will support you on the universities. This is the snapshot. This is the snapshot. In perpetuity. No bureaucracy. Nobody's paid. Rosen just pays. Okay? The expectation for college graduation in Tangelo historically would have been 30 college graduates. We have 160 college graduates. We have 227 college degrees. We have people going to medical school. We have completely changed those odds in Tangelo Park from 9-1 against to 3-1 in favor. We have built the new model for philanthropy. It must be community-based. People will say, how much have you spent in Tangelo? The answer is $13 million. That's a lot of money. In world of philanthropy, come on. You know, I'm going to say this as kindly as I can. Do you have any idea how much money we've wasted, you know, on projects that haven't worked? You know, okay, this is community-based research. You got to stay with it. Now, we have gone everywhere to try to get other people to replicate Tangelo Park with very little success. We made a pitch to, here are some models we've had. And we ran the data. Cullum Hallam in Dublin ran the data for me. We suggested that every major franchise, sports franchise, could afford to do a Tangelo Park in their cities because their teams are located near underserved areas. We've been to the large, I can't go into all the people we've asked who have turned us down. The question is, how can you do it? Well, here's some idea of the money we spend, okay? You could do 25 Tangelos for the cost of one Super Bowl beer commercial. One Super Bowl beer commercial. For the tax break that most people receive, you know, this year, corporate tax break, you could do 1,000 Tangelos. And Chris Dede, if we took the money that Harvard made on their endowment in 2017, we could do 143 Tangelos for the next 20 years. So I'd like you to go over to President Bokow's office and ask him if he will take the money on your endowment this year and we can do Tangelos all over the country.
Well, I'm sure he's watching this episode, so I'm expecting my home phone to ring any minute.
Well, you're a big deal there. You can wander over to his office. What I'm saying to you folks is that we are wasting millions and millions of minds in this country, and we can no longer afford to do it. And you cannot do it by simply giving scholarships to students and sending them to campuses and hoping they succeed. You've got to support them beginning with preschool education. That's Tangelo in a nutshell. I have data to bury you. Crime rate is down 80% in Tangelo. I had a return on investment study done by a University of Chicago economist. He estimated the return on investment is 7-1. For every dollar invested in Tangelo, $7 goes back to society because of reduced crime, increased education, and the preschool benefit. We're at our half hour.
Yeah, we are. I want to let Patsy have a last comment, though. A quick 15-second comment about anything we've discussed over the last 15 or so minutes, Patsy.
Oh, wow. Thanks for having us on here. I think we could, I wish we could solve all the problems and talk about all the issues again. There's so much here. But you know what? These kinds of programs and sharing the message, I think hopefully gets other people involved in the conversation, which is at least part of it, right? So.
Well, I must say this show did start off with a bit of a lie. I actually visited your campus with a bus of people that came to see what you guys were doing. The true story. I think it was a training conference that was held down there at the time. That was big in the late 90s, those corporate training ones. What is the title of volume? What is the title of volume 3? You never gave us that. What's the title?
Blended Learning and Research Perspectives, volume 3.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not very
I've
creative.
enjoyed.
And by the way, Bong, you were sitting in my office several years ago, and we were discussing at the time. You were 46, and I was 64. That was 16 years ago. Do the arithmetic.
Don't do the arithmetic. Yeah, thank you for letting me do a video conference to Korea, I think, from your office. I was on EBS. That's the end. We have to end the show at this point. We have to introduce the next one. But thank you so much, Chuck and Patsy. It's been a delight to have you. And we'll talk about having you do a return trip after your next award-winning paper. Thank you very much. Chris, you want to introduce the next show?
Yes, I'm excited to host next week. Earlier this year, I co-authored a chapter in an ebook called Lessons Teacher Educators Should Have Learned from the Pandemic. And next week we have the editor of the ebook and 2 of the authors of chapters that I think are just fabulous to talk about what teacher educators should have learned, and unfortunately, given where the pandemic is going, should be learning from the pandemic. So please tune in next week, 5:30 Eastern Time.